Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to each and every one of you. It is, of course, 12 o'clock on a Tuesday, and originally I was going to have a guest on today, but Ruddy messaged me this morning on X. That's South Africa First, the YouTube channel, in case you haven't seen him yet. Really awesome content creator. Now, he was scheduled to be on today, and those of you who may have perused the channel yesterday would have gotten a notification saying that he is going to be the guest today. But this morning he messaged me and said he has some stuff that came up at work. He needs to go to a meeting at 12 o'clock. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? And I said, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So instead, it's going to be you and me, like always. And we have a lot to discuss. There's a lot of stories that we have to get through today. Some of it is very cultural. Some of it has to do with increased attacks on Afrikaners, or very specifically on Afrikaans. A lot of it has to do with the country and the stuff that's happening in the country. And as always, the reason I do these kind of stories live is to get your opinions, to get your thoughts on what is actually happening in our country and what do you guys see as the way forward. So Luftwaffe, how you doing? Marku, how you doing? Parsifals, how you doing? David, how you doing? Very happy to be back here with all of you. And I guess we should just jump in and get going. So I'll start with the story that sort of titles this entire stream. Robot, how you doing, sir? Lianka, how you doing? I'll start with a story that titles this stream because that's why most of you, I assume, clicked on it. But there's a lot of other stories. The problem is just whenever you do a title where you try and include all of the things you're going to talk about, it confuses the YouTube algorithm and it doesn't know who to show the video to, and then the live stream just kind of fizzles out because no one actually knows what they're doing. Or maybe I don't know what I'm doing, which is also a great possibility, but who knows? Okay, so Julius Malema wants to take over government. This story is by Newsday. Now, I have watched the actual speech of Julius Malema, and yeah, Newsday does a pretty good job of highlighting all of the sort of attention-grabbing moments within the speech, because much of the speech was just what you have come Julius Malema to be known for. Basically griping about everything that the ANC is doing wrong and how the EFF will solve all of the problems of South Africa. And the EFF really is the party of all solutions. What are those solutions exactly? Well, there is at least one good thing. In his little rally speech, he doesn't really go into white versus black versus anyone else. He keeps it, I would say, rather light on race, not completely without race and not completely without racism, but for the most part, Julius Malema, I would almost go so far as to say, and I have seen no one else pick up on this, not a single person I have watched or read about have picked up on the fact that it appears as if Julius Malema is starting to walk back a lot of the original promises that they made. Plankton, how you doing, sir? Because if you guys remember, Julius Malema has always been the guy that said, we will take all the whites' properties, we'll take all of their businesses, we'll nationalize all of their mines, we'll do all of these things, right? And he's always been like super against white monopoly capital. Now, the problem with that slogan is no one really knows what you mean when you say white monopoly capital. Are you talking about Rupert's capital? Because if you want to take Rupert's capital, go for it, right? I don't think anyone's going to miss Naspers. In fact, News 24 disappearing might actually be a great thing. Well, you'll see, because we have a story from News 24 coming up. But that's usually not what people like Malema are referring to when they say white monopoly capital. You have to understand the communist sort of mindset and the communist sort of mantra, which is to pick a thing that most people can sort of agree on what it means, but then you change the meaning of it entirely for your own benefits. It would be similar to when the ANC says that they are a party, they are a constitutional party, and that they care about the Constitution. Of course, what the ANC has done is they've changed the meaning of the Constitution entirely, where the Constitution is meant to protect the citizenry against a state that is built on tyranny. The ANC has decided to use the constitution as almost like a blueprint. It's the thing that gives them the rights to do certain things. And instead, you've actually heard ANC members and ministers say the constitution protects the ANC against some people in South Africa. So whenever, for example, actually Cyril Ramaphosa may have said this not directly, but indirectly, because whenever, for example, the Free Market Foundation or AfriForum tries to challenge the ANC on things like expropriation without compensation, the ANC will go, but the Constitution tells us that we should increase the dignity of all South Africans, and that South Africans deserve land, and all South Africans have a right to own property, and all South Africans have this, that, and the other. So in other words, you have this government that has taken the constitution, which, by the way, the point of the constitution is directly to stem the power of government so that government can't interfere with the citizens' lives unless the citizens, of course, break the law. But the government has taken the constitution and instead turned it into a weapon to be wielded against a law-abiding citizenry. That's what communists do. They love using sort of common phrases and common words to turn it into an uncommon thing that no one really understands, and that makes it very difficult to negotiate against. I'll give you guys another example of it. Engela, how you doing? Goose, how you doing? Echo, how you doing, sir? I'll give you guys another example of this. The communist or the leftist phrase, love is love. Now, love is love is actually directly stolen from Christianity. And we know this because there's a book, When the Ball Ends. It's the name of the book. You can go check it out. It was released sort of in the late 80s, early 90s. And in the book, this man writes about how to ensure gay rights makes its way into the common vernacular. So how do gay people convince the common public to allow them to do all of these things that previously gay people were not allowed to do? And love is love, that phrase is highlighted in the book because it would make very difficult for a Christian people to argue against. If you say love is love, Christians believe that God is love. So when you say love is love, you are making it very difficult for them to argue against this. Now, there's a number of other suggestions that sort of feature in the book, things that gay people should absolutely not ever discuss, and that would be the messiness of intercourse between two men, the sort of promiscuity that exists within that society and within that community, as well as targeting mothers with children. So targeting mothers and saying, what would you do if your little boy was gay? Because they knew once the mother gets this empathetic feeling towards her child, she will extend that empathy towards other people that are gay. And if you can get the women, you'll automatically get the men, because men exist only to want to keep women happy at the end of the day. That's why men have pretty much always sacrificed their lives outside the gate so that the women and children can be safe behind the walls. So, you know, they understood. They physically built this program, and you can read the book. It's available pretty much everywhere. It's When the Ball Ends. Can't remember the author now of the book. But nevertheless, this is sort of common communist strategy. So Julius Malema now has changed his language quite a bit, and you'll see when we get there. So I'm going to read through a couple of quotes from Newsday, and we'll discuss it as we go. He described South Africa's 2026 local government elections as a pivotal point, which EFF supporters should embrace. Now, Julius Malema has said this a few times already. 2026, according to Julius Malema, is victory or death. This is the year. According to Julius Malema, if the EFF does not win in this election, it's sort of the end. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this would be the end, because Julius Malema is looting just fine. Money is rolling in from everywhere. The man has multiple mansions throughout South Africa. He owns multiple farms in Limpopo. So clearly, Julius Malema isn't struggling. The movement, the revolution, has been very good to Mr. Malema. But I can imagine that Julius Malema. So here's the thing with Julius Malema. We don't quite know where the funding for the EFF comes from. And this is actually a far bigger problem that no one actually ever seems to discuss. We know that the ANC receives money from certain places, and they do reveal some of their donations. The DA is actually one of the, and you guys know I'm not a huge fan of the DA, but I do have to give them credit where credit is due. The DA is pretty open about all of their donors and where most of their money comes from. The Freedom Front Plus is pretty open about where their money comes from, although they don't get that much money. EFF and MK, they have multiple years in a row now failed to reveal any of their income. Literally not a cent. We know that they swim in cash. They have a lot of money. But where that money actually comes from, they don't reveal it. And they hide behind the fact that it falls below the threshold. So you only need to declare donors if they donate over a certain amount. I can't remember what it is in South Africa. It may be 5 million or 10 million, something to that effect. Or 100,000, I think. And the EFF maintains that all of their donations is less than that. And so they don't have to reveal their funding. But I can imagine that some of the funders of the EFF is maybe starting to ask some uncomfortable questions of Julius. For example, where is our revolution? You promised a revolution. You promised that you'd be able to get into power, and yet you are not in power. In fact, you appear to be slipping. And for those of you that don't know, just go check the election results. The EFF's greatest result was their first election ever. And since then, they've just sort of been fizzling out. Now they're under 10%, edging towards 8%. And much of the most recent polling and by-election results actually show that the EFF could go as low as 6% in the upcoming election. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those donors for the EFF just sort of went, guys, we're starting to waste our money here. We need to see results. Otherwise, this is going to be a problem. But okay, nevertheless, today South Africa is confronted with a choice that can no longer be postponed. It is a choice between victory or death. It's not the first time he's said that. When we take over government, so they always like to speak, he's also called the CIC, right? The commander-in-chief, because they say that they are a government in waiting. When we take over government, we're going to expropriate land that is abandoned and give it to you. Super interesting shift in focus, which may actually suggest that Julius Malema is waking up to a reality that the ANC still seems to struggle with. And that is that South Africans, generally speaking, are not very bloodthirsty. South Africans, and by the way, for my video today, that'll come out at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But in that video, the research that I did actually reveals an incredible sort of reality that the ANC has pretty much their entire existence fought against. And that is, they were given by the Soviets, they were given this blueprint for how to liberate South Africa. And it was through revolution, because Vladimir Lenin himself believed that there can be no liberation without terror. And he said it, without terror, there is no revolution. You need terror and revolution. And of course, it worked brilliantly in Russia. The Bolsheviks, which is actually the Mensheviks, because it wasn't the majority of Russians that supported Lenin, but of course, as communist governments ought to do, they just rewrite the history when they get to power. But nevertheless, the Mensheviks wasn't a small group. They did, at the sort of height of their movement, have between 10 to 20% of the Russian population supporting their violent revolution against what they called, at the time at least, the bourgeoisie. So they gave this blueprint to the ANC, and the ANC thought, oh, here we go, right? We're going to do exactly what the Russians did, except didn't really work. Wherever the ANC went, most of the black tribes in South Africa were sort of okay with just kind of doing their own thing. They really struggled to try and convince the majority of black people that war and revolution was the way to go. This is, among other things, why the ANC had to go find allies outside of South Africa, why they had to go to places like Angola, places like Mozambique, places like Namibia, places like Zimbabwe with the ZANU PF, because they found it very difficult. They could get the black people of South Africa to support a movement that wants to give them more rights, no problem. But it was whenever they tried to suggest violent revolution, so take up your arms and let's fight, that most of the South African black population was just sort of like, nah, we cool. This is not a problem. This is why the first ever necklacing takes place in 1985, I believe it is. It's a man by the name of Kinney that refuses to step down from a municipality in, I can't remember the province now, but effectively the ANC wanted all of the municipal leaders to step down because they believed that this would be a great protest against the apartheid government. And instead, Mr. Kinney was like, no, I was elected by my people to support and to represent my people. I'm not stepping down to fight some imaginary war that you guys have going on. And the ANC accused him of corruption and stealing from the people, and they burned him, right? They necklaced him. Winnie Mandela famously says, with our boxes of matches and our necklaces, we will liberate this country, because the ANC had to continually sort of spread this terror throughout the black Bantu lands of South Africa to try and get the black people to either by fear or by conviction join this violent revolution that they had going on. And I think what Julius Malema has realized here is that this isn't working. The language of we're going to take white people's land and we're going to take white people's banks and we're going to take all of this, most black people don't really have a lot of appetite for that. They're like, no, just give us jobs. There's actually, you'll see in the video because I go through it, but there's a new article on Common Sense, The Common Sense, that actually shows polling over the last 10 years done by the Institute for Race Relations in South Africa, as well as the SRF, the Social Research Foundation. And over the last 10 years, they've asked the same questions to South Africans every single year. And what they have found in the aggregate is that only about 4% of South Africans believe that racism is a big problem in this country, insofar as the government needs to tackle racism as an issue. About 90% of all South Africans, black South Africans included, by the way, say that race should not be used as an identifier as to who can get or can't get a job. When it comes to who can do business with the government, almost 90% of South Africans, black, white, purple, doesn't matter, all agree race should not factor into it. In fact, about 85% of all South Africans believe that merit and merit alone should be the identifier for who can get a job, for who can do business with the state. South Africans are not a very revolutionary leftist group of people. They are, by and large, in the main, people that just want jobs, and this is, I think, Julius Malema is starting to catch on that, abandoned homes is probably better than taking white businesses and white farms, because this is the promise. But trust me, Julius Malema isn't good as a result of this. I'm not making this video saying, hey guys, Julius Malema is finally worth voting for. No. It does get worse, but we'll get to that in a second. So Julius Malema says they're going to expropriate land and that is abandoned, and they're going to give it to you. We're going to expropriate buildings that are abandoned and give them to you, give them to the students, and give them to the youth. Now, there is actually a video that I shared on my X. It doesn't quite show all of it, but it shows enough of it. Okay, so this is the city of Johannesburg, right? And this is just a view from the train as people are driving in from into Johannesburg. This is what South Africa looks like. This is the reality of South Africa. Now, of course, for someone like Julius Malema, he believes that giving these buildings, and maybe we should start from the beginning. The problem, so I, for example, don't actually have an ideological problem with the government going to abandoned buildings and abandoned land and saying, what the hell are you guys doing here? Why is this building standing here just becoming derelict? Why is this land just here? Why aren't you doing anything with it? Why am I not seeing anything happening? Now, with land, this becomes a little bit more tricky because a lot of people will buy land in terms of, or for the purposes of prospecting. So, for example, if I have I worked in construction plumbing, so I worked with a lot of developers. This was before my YouTube career. And what these developers would often do is they would, in one go, buy like 25 plots of land, not wanting to develop all 25 of them, but they have an inkling, an idea that Polokwane would develop in this direction, so north, south, east, or west. And then they would buy 25 plots of land in that direction, with the idea being that they might be able to develop maybe 3 or 4 of those plots, but then other developers will want to develop, and so they can sell these plots to these other developers. Now, if the government says they're going to take abandoned land, is the government then considering that land that is bought for future development as abandoned because no one has yet done anything on that land? So I can actually get behind the government saying, if we see a building that is just being derelict and just being left abandoned, we're going to take that building. What I would not agree with is then giving that building to people for free. No, take the building and put it on the market. Sell it, right? Sell it. Say, who wants this building? Give us a business plan. Tell us what you want to do with this building. You can buy it and you can do whatever you want with it, because the owners that are currently in charge of this building have done nothing with it. They've just left this building to completely go to waste. I actually agree with that. I think that's fine. You can absolutely do that, because sometimes it is just buildings that the owners don't really care. They just bought out the building to ensure that competition can't open up next door. So this has happened before. You might have a store on the opposite side of the road that sells furniture, and so it buys the building on the opposite side of the road just to make sure that no furniture shop can open there, so that they are the only ones selling furniture. That they don't care what happens to the building. And from my perspective, that's just anti-markets. You should not be cornering the market in that way. So yeah, take it, sell it to whoever wants it. The picture I'm showing you, the video I showed you on X, I show you for a reason, right? Because if your argument is, and Odin, how is this communism? I don't think you know what communism is if you say that that sounds like communism. Because all I'm saying is that the government should be protecting the free market. And if you have companies that's trying to corner the market and push all competition out, there is not a capitalist theorist in the world of any repute that would disagree with that. Even the biggest champions of capitalism all agree that it is the government's job to make sure that there is competition within the market. All of them, Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, Adam Smith, you name them, they are all in favor of regulations and priorities and movements by the government to ensure optimal competition within the market. So when you have a company that is going and buying 30 buildings and leaving 29 of them completely empty just so that no competition can open up, that's not incredibly fair or well. Now, we could argue, and you could say, well, it's not the government's job. Someone needs to police the market. You can't just let the market do what the market wants. That is what we call laissez-faire capitalism. And in every single economic model that has ever been run, it only ends one way always. One guy owns everything and everyone else is a slave. That's how it ends, always. Because the one thing that laissez-faire capitalists just fail to acknowledge is the fact that, yes, government is corrupt, but so are people. And if you allow people in their corruption unlimited power, guess what they will do? They will spread that corruption to absolutely everyone, because that's the nature of humanity, which is why you need to build a system where everyone is policing everyone else to stop the corruption as far as possible. Now, you could say, well, I don't like the idea that the government sells the building and keeps the cash. Okay, what if the government just forces the company to sell because the company clearly doesn't want to do anything with the building? So the government says, look, you guys aren't doing anything with this building. This building has stood empty for 25 years. You've done nothing with it. It's time to sell this building or do something with it. But at some point, you do need someone to step in and say, wait a second, you can't have 30 buildings not doing anything. These buildings could be used to build businesses. They could be used to build apartments. Something can be done here. You need someone to step in and say, you guys are cornering the market here, especially in Midtown, right? In the inner city where you have a lot of competition for space. You need someone to step in and say, you guys can't just buy everything you want. There has to be a balance. Overregulation can also strive for growth. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make here is not for overregulation. It's for the right amount of regulation. No person or government has the right to take my property, even when I don't use it. It is my property. Dylan, here we're not talking about your house or maybe like a private house that you own, right? Or a holiday home that you maybe use once a year. That's not the property that I'm referring to here. I'm referring to property that stands empty for 20, 25, 30 years. You don't do anything on it, but it also ensures that no one can ever compete against you. The argument there that no one gets to take my stuff, it is my stuff, then becomes a problem, because if that is the case, what do you do? Say, for example, Amazon. Now, Amazon makes more money than almost any South African company out there. What do you do if Amazon steps into CBD Johannesburg and buys every single building in the CBD and just opens one building, Amazon offices? All the other buildings are closed. You can't open them. What do you do now? They now own all of those buildings. No one can open a building. No one can open a business in CBD. All of the buildings are closed because Amazon is just sitting on them. And I'm not arguing that if the building is empty for a year, the government takes it. I'm arguing for 20 years, 25 years. So get this company, give them the time to develop the building if that is what they want to do. But at some point, you do have to step in and say, wait, the hell are you guys doing? Like you're buying up all of the property and you're not letting it go. Like this does not make a lot of sense. I thought the original purpose of government is protection. Why are government providing service delivery? It's a whole deeper discussion that we can have. The building has been taken over by gangs. What now? Your property has been in the hands of gangs. Are you taking it back, or law enforcement? Food for thought. Well, Siege Gardens, this is where I would actually argue that a company has the right to get their own private security and clear out their building. If the police won't do it, the company has full right to get private security to do it. So I don't really have a problem. But I'm open to suggestions. I'm genuinely open. If you guys genuinely the majority of people say, look, the government must never touch any properties ever. This is my property. I and I alone own it. No one else gets to keep it. Even if I want to keep it empty for a year, I'm happy with that. Or for 100 years, I'm happy with that, right? I'm just saying there are practical solutions and practical problems that do need to be acknowledged. And there are places where you do need the government to step in and say, okay, wait a second. To this point and no further. We want to have more competition in the market, and you are making it impossible. Nevertheless, Julius Malema goes on to say that they're going to take all of this. The problem that I have at a fundamental level is, what do you consider abandoned? If I buy a plot of land and for a year I don't develop it, is that now an abandoned piece of land? If I now buy a building, but I'm only going to build or develop that building into a business in 5 years from now, is that building abandoned for the next 5 years until I finally start to build in it? The problem with this, what Julius Malema is saying, and what most people, I think, what he's hoping most people won't recognize, is the fact that It's going to be up to government to decide when a building is or isn't abandoned. And once you have that, you have the government is effectively able to do anything they want. And here's where it gets actually, I think, a little darker, especially in the context of South Africa. Much of the problems currently existing in South Africa is related to direct policy and action by the government itself. Take, for example, Pick and Pay. Now, I wanted to make a video about Pick and Pay, and I ultimately decided against it just because I didn't really think anyone would care. But I will discuss it here. Pick and Pay made a lot of mistakes, and no one is going to deny that. No one is going to sit here and say that Pick and Pay is completely innocent in their own downfall. They made a lot of bad decisions, which ultimately came and bit them in the ass, right? And now Pick and Pay is on the ropes, desperately trying to get back. One of their biggest mistakes, as it turns out, isn't the fact that they severely mistreated a lot of their suppliers. One of their biggest mistakes isn't the fact that they were trying to corner a market that is simply not growing. And yes, there is an actual bit of truth behind that. Pick and Pay's business model of trying to become the largest and only retailer in the country can only really work if you have a population that is continuously growing and getting richer. If you have zero economic growth, it becomes harder and harder, and that model ultimately spiraled out of control. Now, many people might say, but what about Checkers? They're doing exactly the same. Checkers' business model is built exclusively for South Africa. You see, because unlike Pick and Pay, who had, for the majority, they had a franchisee business model. I know because I knew a bunch of franchise owners for Pick and Pay. Checkers doesn't. Every single Checkers in the country that you go to buy your groceries at is owned by by Checkers head office. There are no franchisees. It's owned by the head office. The head office makes all of the money. This means that Checkers doesn't actually they don't look at the profits of an individual store. They look at the profits of a town. So this is why, for example, here in the Western Cape, you can't drive 15 minutes without hitting a Checkers. Literally, every 15 minutes, there's a Checkers. And you think to yourself, well, how the hell are these guys making money? Well, not all of them are making maximum amounts of money, but they don't have to, because it's all one head office, and head office only really looks at the bulk of the town. How is the town or the area doing? And as long as that's up, they don't really care. The point is they're trying to close down ShopRite, not ShopRite, Spar, Pick and Pay. They're busy making a move on Woolworths, although it seems like they may have abandoned that whole mess. Mainly, I think, because they're afraid of Walmart that is coming into South Africa, because Walmart is coming in to kind of disrupt the market, which is going to be super interesting. Amazon coming in to South Africa is also meant to disrupt the market. And it's going to be super interesting to see how Checkers ultimately deals with Amazon, with Walmart. And let's see if a resurging Pick and Pay can actually come in and make some moves. The reason I say that's interesting, and this is a bit of an aside, a bit of a sidetrack here, but I've been keeping an eye on Amazon and Walmart coming into South Africa, because in many ways, the downfall of Pick and Pay was accelerated as a result of Checkers' very aggressive expansion. So Pick and Pay's business model worked when they were the biggest and pretty much the prestige shopping experience for all South Africans. And then as soon as Checkers became super aggressive, the overbearing nature of Pick and Pay's business started to really hurt. And ultimately, they fell as a result of Checkers' aggressive expansion. Now, Checkers is built very much on the same premise, but Amazon isn't. See, Amazon doesn't have physical stores. Everything Amazon sells is online, but Amazon has Prime. And Prime is something that Amazon can support at a loss much longer than Checkers can. And for those of you that don't know, this is how Amazon has always done business. In the US, they did this. In the UK, they did this. This is how Amazon operates. So Amazon does the following. They move into a market and they corner the market by simply slashing their prices, effectively selling things at a loss. And Amazon is happy to lose millions upon millions, if not billions of rands. Because the point here is to become the only one. So they can sustain it. And how they sustain it is because Amazon isn't really a retail or a retailer. Amazon is really a cloud service. That's where they make most of their money, is in their Amazon Web Services. Those web services subsidize the retail business until the retail business is the only one, and then Amazon can do pretty much whatever they want. Can Checkers actually do this? I highly doubt it, because Checkers has been failing to do that with Take-A-Lot. There's been sort of a move to try and get more and more of this. So Take-A-Lot, Mr. Delivery, Checkers, the sort of unholy alliance between Checkers isn't in charge of Take-A-Lot. Sorry, the point I'm trying to make is Take-A-Lot has been failing to do what Amazon is doing and does do, because Take-A-Lot doesn't have their own web services, and so they can't really do it. Checkers won't be able to compete with Amazon because they don't have web services either. They don't have servers, and they don't have the ability to undercut their own prices. It would make them go bankrupt. So Amazon is already here. And then you have Walmart, loss leader for future monopoly. Alistair, pretty much exactly that. They'll be a loss leader for as long as they have to, until they corner the market, become a monopoly, and then they'll start making money. But Walmart is coming in with a different strategy. One that is going to be super interesting to see if that actually plays out. Have any of you followed Walmart in South Africa? Have any of you followed it? Most of the hijacked buildings and abandoned buildings started after 1994 because of the government's laws. The economy went down the drain, and taxes in all fields went up. Anita, very true. No, yeah. Okay. Okay, so let me tell you guys about Walmart. Okay, so Walmart has 2 stores at the moment in South Africa, both of them in Johannesburg. But these stores are thriving. Like, they're really doing well. And they're doing well in spite of a warning by Whitey Basson. So when Walmart first moved in, and remember, there was this whole shenanigans with the government, and they eventually couldn't call it Walmart, and so they ended up calling it Massmart, and they bought Macro, and they bought Builders Warehouse, and Game, and all the rest of them. So when Walmart moves in, Whitey Basson says they'll never make money. And the reason, according to Whitey Basson, they will never make money is because the philosophy of Walmart will not work in South Africa. So what are these differing philosophies? In South Africa, retailers follow what is known as a high-low philosophy in terms of selling. This means when you walk into a store, in any shop in South Africa, all of the prices of all of the goods in that store is the highest possible amount to still ensure that if you need it, you will buy it. Every item. So it is the maximum amount that they know people will buy if they actually need the item. So, for example, let's take butter. If you need butter desperately, and the butter costs 150 Rand, you won't buy butter. But if the butter costs 92 Rand, you'll buy butter. Yeah, it's expensive, but you do need the butter, and so you'll buy it. The low part of it, so that's the high. The low part of it is what you see everywhere in South Africa, and that is specials. This is why every single retailer in South Africa have these specials every few weeks. So butter normally is 90 bucks. That's because that's the most that you are willing to pay. But every 2 or 3 weeks, they have butter for 63 Rand, for 500 grams. They could always charge 63 Rand for 500 grams of butter, but then the special wouldn't really make sense. And according to Whitey Basson, this works. This works in South Africa. South Africans like the idea of specials because South Africans are conscientious about spending and they want to pay as little as possible. If you tell them washing powder for $30, they're going to go buy the washing powder for $30. Even though you could technically always charge $30 for the washing powder, this is just the business model that works. Now, Walmart operates on what psychologically works in the US, which is best price always. Now, why is that psychology super important in America? Because there is a lot of competition in America. Pretty much every few blocks in America, you will find a bunch of warehouse-sized stores, Costco, Target, Walmart, you name it, it's there, all trying to sell you stuff at the best possible price always. So the competition is fierce. And as a result of that fierce competition, you start seeing sort of funny things like Costco, for example, with their famous hot dogs, which still loses their money. They don't sell it for a profit, but it exists because it gets you in the door. And if you're in the door for a hot dog, maybe you'll buy a bunch of other stuff. Right. So, and they do this massive Black Friday deals and they do massive sales where they'll actually lose money on the item that they're selling, but it's to get you in the door so that you buy the other stuff. But effectively, it's known as best price every day. That's the philosophy that works in America. When I walk in, I have to get the best price possible, always. Otherwise, I'm leaving. Now, Walmart follows this philosophy. Best price always, or best price every day. And so what Walmart did, which is very clever, because Whitey Basson said, your model won't work. South Africans like specials. So instead, what Walmart did was they chose a bunch of goods that they know most South Africans will always buy. And those goods are marked as best price every day. And on average, if Newsday actually did an article on this where they compared 3 baskets, one from Pick and Pay, one from Checkers, and one from Walmart, and Walmart was about 90 Rand cheaper on the whole basket than Checkers, and almost 100 and something Rand cheaper than Pick and Pay on the whole basket of goods, because Walmart has this best price every day. And then on a bunch of other goods, so goods that are considered more luxury goods in South Africa, they do specials. So high price, low price specials. And the idea for Walmart, at least from what I could find, is that eventually they'll just make everything best price every day. Eventually, when South Africans have gotten used to the idea, when I walk into this Walmart, it is the best possible price that they can give me. As soon as South Africans are aware of that, then that's just all their goods will just be that. But for now, they're sort of playing with the South African psychology, trying to get South Africans to get used to the idea of best price every single day. Now, this should also give you an example of, or a bit of information as to why Rupert spent so much time with Ramaphosa telling Donald Trump that there is absolutely no discrimination in South Africa. This is why, Checkers and Pick and Pay and all of these guys are part of the government's BEE protection racket. Because if America, and I just want to paint this picture for all of you. If America tomorrow decided to really start investing in South Africa, Costco comes to South Africa, Target comes to South Africa, a whole host of others, Walmart, Kmart, all of these guys come. Well, Kmart will just open up. Walmart will just open Kmart stores as well. But you have the big retailers in terms of clothing that suddenly comes to South Africa. You have a bunch of online businesses in America, and I'm talking thousands of online businesses that will just extend their business to South Africa because they want the African market. As a result of this, Checkers, Pick and Pay, they die. because they've effectively built themselves to be protected by the ANC against any competition. And any competition that comes in, that suddenly, because these Costco guys target uh, everyday base price isn't something new to them. It's something that they do. They know how it works. So suddenly they're going to start fighting each other for the base price every single day, and Checkers and Pick and Pay will not know how to respond to this. They won't understand how to stop it. And that is their biggest fear. Amazon, of course, is now in the mix as well, and Amazon does free same-day delivery and all the rest of it. I wanted to give you guys that aside because I've been reading a lot about the sort of war that is happening for Walmart, which really excites me. I like when things disrupt the market a little bit. So anyways, getting back to, sorry for the detour, guys, but I wanted to give you that detour. Back to this. Here's where things get really dark from Mr. Malema. The FF leader further promoted universal free water and electricity for all social grant beneficiaries and the unemployed. All the beneficiaries, and I quote, of grants shall receive free electricity because they are poor already. All the unemployed shall receive free electricity and clean water. They make social grant recipients pay for electricity. How can you give people grants and, on the other hand, demand that they must pay for electricity? This will be devastating to the South African economy. Not only will this just completely kill Eskom, it will kill the South African taxpayer, who is already one of the most overtaxed peoples in the world. But this is the danger. If you guys remember, I had this conversation with Martin van Staden. This is the problem with universal suffrage. This is the problem with allowing poor people to vote. Because what Julius Malema is doing here is a direct, and this might actually be the biggest threat Julius Malema has ever made in terms of the South African economy and the South African voter landscape. Because Julius Malema has just promised 28 million South Africans free electricity, free water, free buildings, free land if they vote for him. In a country where people are desperate, like genuinely desperate, and Julius Malema isn't saying they're going to take anyone's business or take anyone's land. He's talking about abandoned land. This may actually work. And if this were to happen, you're going to end up with things like this, which should actually upset every single one of us, where you have municipalities that spend 20 million rand on water projects. And I do need to say, the word project here is being very generous with the concept of a project. What this municipality did was they built a bunch of steel tanks that have to be manually filled with water, and then pipes that come from these steel tanks that then connect to a bunch of people's homes in townships. I mean, we're glorifying the word like a JoJo tank and turning it into a project. Not entirely sure that I agree with the idea of a project here, but nevertheless, this is what we can sort of expect from a move like this. Not only the fact that people who don't pay for stuff don't really appreciate the stuff, right? Like, if you don't pay for something, why would you appreciate the thing that you're getting? If you give people free homes, that's not their homes, why would they care about it? If you give people free water, why is it that when I take a shower, I shower for no more than 5 minutes? Well, because I live in Cape Town and I actually pay the rates on water. I pay for water and it's very expensive. I don't like spending too much money on utilities, and so I have to shower quick. Why is it that I turn off my geyser every single day? I turn it on an hour before I want to go shower. I shower and I turn it off because I pay for the electricity. But now you have someone who gets it for free, who don't have to pay for it at all, not even at a reduced rate. why would I turn anything off? Why would I care about anything? And that is fundamentally the biggest threat in this entire article, and why I believe Julius Malema is throwing down the gauntlet. And I'll explain to you why it's worse than you think. So even if you think that Julius Malema won't win the elections as a result of these promises, although I do think these promises may help, I don't think he'll win. But I think what Julius Malema is signaling is more dangerous, because at the end of 2027, that's a year from now, a bit over a year, Cyril Ramaphosa will be out of office, because that's how the ANC has always worked. The ANC has their leadership conference in December of 2027. After that, Cyril Ramaphosa is out of office. The guy that comes into Cyril Ramaphosa's place is our current deputy minister. He is not a fan of the current GNU. In fact, he is a far bigger fan of the EFF. He likes the EFF. They get along. Now, Julius Malema doesn't just say that if they get into government in this local government elections. He's saying when they get into government, period, this is what they'll do. I believe that this will sink the entirety of the South African economy. And I think this because I don't see the South African economy having a lot of room left to move. Just based on the fundamentals of reality. We have an economy where almost 20% of the total GDP of our country goes to salaries. Just the 20% of the budget of our country. So all the money that our government gets, 20% of that goes to salaries. Our government borrows money to pay its debts. Right now, the South African government spends 1 million rand a day repaying debts. Not 1 million, it's 1 billion, I think. Is it 1 billion? Never mind. What I do know is we borrow money at the moment to repay our debts at the tune of about, I believe it's something like 15% at the moment. So we borrow about 15% every single year just to pay back our debts. Now, if that was you, let's say, for example, you had a friend and your friend told you that they make personal loans at the bank to repay their credit card debt. Would you call that friend a responsible individual? Of course not. Every functioning human being would go, dude, this is a really bad idea. Like, you're borrowing money to repay your debts. That's not smart, because you're just getting deeper into debt and you're not actually fixing the debt problem, because as soon as this friend has paid off the credit card debt, he'll now have to take the credit card to pay back the other debt, because and it gets worse because you're obviously paying interest on this debt. This is where South Africa is. We are borrowing money every single year just to repay our debts. And then we're borrowing more money just to do the job that the state requires, because the state no longer has the money to do all of the things that they're required to do. That is what is known as a fiscal catastrophe waiting to happen. So on the fiscal side of things, South Africa is heading towards a complete meltdown. On the economic side of things, we have a country that has not grown economically for almost 20 years. No growth. Zero. A population that now sits with 65% of its young people unemployed. The fact that this country has not yet gone into an economic meltdown is actually a miracle. Many countries throughout the history have gone into economic meltdowns with far better numbers than South Africa. So the idea that we're not yet living in a third world hellhole is actually a blessing, because based on the fundamentals, and I realize there's economists that will tell you no, 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 it's actually fine because there's some good signs. I'm telling you, I don't believe that those good signs are good signs, because it's effectively taking a bit of wool trying to cover a gash across your chest. You require open heart surgery, but instead the doctor is giving you a little star on your forehead. Yeah, it might make you feel good for a bit, but it's not actually solving the problem of your heart failing. And I see no evidence that the government is in any way, shape, or form interested in fixing the underlying problems. Instead, what I see is a government that is merely trying to hold on. That's all they want. Just hold on a little bit longer. Dave, okay, let me just see what you. This guy is a moron, clear and simple. On the point of the cancer regime's borrowing money, do some research on the income from our mines and the petrol levy, where the state steals every rand. I'm not sure. Okay, so Dave, if I understand you correctly, you are calling me a moron. Okay, perfect. Um, I don't know if you think that is conducive to actual conversation. What I do know is you should always imagine how you will treat people when you actually stand with them in a room. Because one of the problems that I see in the modern era is people believe that as long as there's a screen between them, they can do and say whatever they want. And they don't really have to be cordial towards one another. I have treated you with respect, even though you have not shown me the same courtesy. So I will give you an opportunity to explain your comment so that you and I can actually have a conducive conversation here. Because simply calling me a moron and then making a bunch of vague claims about stuff that I should go check out is not conducive to an intellectual conversation. So if you wish to engage intellectually, by all means, share your work. Tell me what it is that you think I'm missing, and then we can have that conversation. Otherwise, it appears to me that you're full of it. EP, how you doing, bro? No, it doesn't look like there's any good signs in South Africa's economics. And at least from everything that I can tell, I think the only people that actually believe that there is something good going on in South Africa's economics are people that have customers and clients that want to invest here. And they have to sort of convince their customers and clients to stay, because they might want to leave. That's what I can tell, right? That's what I can see. Um, on this, there is actually something to this that it just sort of reminds me, because it doesn't happen often. I have to say, most of my viewers are very cool. Even people I disagree with, even people who come out and immediately say, I don't agree with you, and here's why. That's usually how the disagreements go. I get a lot of emails from viewers that go, so I don't agree with you. This is the points here. This is how I feel. And I love that, right? Because that opens up a conversation. We can actually discuss, how do you feel? How do I feel? Where do we disagree? Where do we connect? And very often what happens in those conversations is that person misunderstood the point that I was making, or oftentimes they just didn't understand from what angle I was going, right? So I took a different angle and they were actually looking at this angle. So we usually find, oh, we actually do agree. We're just talking past one another here. But I find the absence of real life, and I'm going to say this, and this genuinely isn't a threat, just so that everyone is clear here. I'm not a guy that fights. I've never really started a fight in my entire life. I've been involved in fights, but I never started any. So this isn't a threat. I'm not trying to make a threat here. But in general, in the real world, if you walked up to any human being, right, in the real world, and you started off with, you are a moron, you'd get your teeth knocked out. And justifiably so. That person would slap you so bloody hard that you wouldn't know where to go next. But the fact that there are screens between us and you are effectively anonymous online, people have this sense that I can say whatever I want. I can treat people however which way I want, and it doesn't affect on me. Uh, I want to say to you, it does reflect on you. You might feel like it does not reflect on you personally because it's just online, but it does reflect on you. The way you treat people online does reflect on the kind of person that you actually are. And as people get more and more used to the online world, and as we eventually figure out how to deal with it morally, people who do just go about insulting others online will just get that reputation in real life as well. So don't do it. I mean, if you want to insult me, I'm not going to stop you. But I do think you hurt your own arguments, if that's your approach. But Stefan, we are going to get smart cities and new schools and universities. Harry, I forgot that. Sorry, I forgot about the smart cities and the universities and stuff. I do apologize. I call them keyboard warriors. Yeah, pretty much. So how do we fix it? Give us some solutions. Dropman, how you doing, bro? So the solutions are actually fairly simple. Uh, a lot of people like to ask me about solutions, make a video about solutions, make a video about solutions. The solutions are not hard. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. We have evidence of how it should work. So here's just two things that the government can do, which will instantly fix a lot of the problems. Number one, get out of the economy. Drop BEE, drop employment equity, drop affirmative action. Get out of the economy. You clearly don't know enough to actually run it. So that's the first one. The second, get out of service delivery where the government clearly sucks at it. So deliver the services that you have to deliver, right? And this would be the police, the military. You could maybe make the argument for roads, although even there, I would say you don't even need to worry about that. But okay, I'm not even talking about lower taxes, because if you open the market and if you get out of the service delivery where you can't provide that service efficiently, the taxes doesn't even matter that much. You can lower taxes later on, but for now, if you do these two things, even with the high tax rate of South Africa will still make money. People will still start building businesses and people will still start making money. The biggest issue at the moment is the fact that the government makes it impossible for anyone to do business, and then the government refuses to share its services. They want to provide water, for example. They want to provide electricity. They want to provide railways. They want to provide the harbors. They want to provide all of these services that they clearly don't know how to provide. They're clearly not very good at it. And nevertheless, because they provide it, no one else is allowed to. So this slows things down considerably. Businesses and governments will figure out how to get around the tax system. You don't have to worry about that, right? Business will always figure out how to get around the tax system. Um, but if you get out of the private sector and you allow the businesses to actually just operate, you can think about lowering taxes later on. And that will usually follow a government that does get out of the private sector's way will eventually lower taxes because it will realize, wait, if I charge less in taxes, but I have more people working, I make more money. So that's sort of that's the golden rule. Less taxes means more people working, means more money in the end. But you have to make that connection. And of course, the government can't make that connection. And that is because the ANC doesn't actually operate in the way that people think. So many people think about the ANC um, as just a bunch of looters. And yes, to some extent, there are a bunch of looters in the ANC. This is true. a lot of people in the ANC does loot a lot. And I bring up this story only because it's an interesting argument. It is an interesting argument. It's an argument that's been raised by the Free Market Foundation. It's an argument that's been raised by the Institute of Race Relations. It's an argument that is now increasingly being raised by columnists and economists and political analysts all across the country. It's an argument that I have raised since the moment of the establishment of the GNU. At the time, however, I actually had a different idea. My idea was that the ANC is bringing in the DA to ensure that the DA provides the services that the ANC can then take the credit for. I have since changed my mind, and I now see a lot of other people are also catching on. So there's a few things that you have to understand when it comes to the ANC, but at its core, there really is only one thing, because that one thing explains everything else, and that is the NDR, the National Democratic Revolution. If you understand the NDR, the ANC makes all the sense in the world. Now, what makes this difficult is because if you ask leftists in this country, they will swear up and down that the ANC isn't a communist government. And I know because I've had conversations with leftists who swear up and down there's nothing communist about the government, the ANC. Because look at all the businesses. Look at how people are allowed to buy homes and own private property. And that is only because people fail to understand what the National Democratic Revolution document is all about. That is because people misunderstand the purpose of communism, specifically the kind the ANC adheres to. And I would almost say that the kind the ANC adheres to is fascism plus. And let me explain it this way. Fascism, Mussolini said that fascism is by definition in everything corporatist. What he meant by that was the government is the main corporation. Now, corporation simply means body. The word corpo, taken from Greek, means body, right? So fascism is a body. The government is the body. The people in the country, they're the cells of the body. They're the atoms. They're the this one might be a heart, this one might be a this. But effectively, Mussolini broke it down into almost like instead of organs, rather cells, because all cells are equal. The organs might be more important, less important, so on and so forth, but all cells are equal, right? The idea here is everything in the society has to exist for the benefit of the state. Now, the communist governments of the Soviet Union viewed the state as the owner of all things. The fascists said, no. The state doesn't have to run everything. The private guys can run the thing as long as the thing serves the interests of the state first. And then once the interest of the state is served, then everything else. The National Democratic Revolution, that glorious document that came straight from the Soviet Union, was exactly that. That was the plan that was handed down to the ANC. This blueprint for a different kind of Soviet communism, where ultimately Stalin brought everything under his control, and he controlled everything with the Politburo, with the business chambers, and every single facet of society had like the centralized structure that told everyone how to operate everything. Lenin had a slightly different approach. Lenin's idea was much closer to what China would become. This idea that you would be allowed to own a factory, but in name only. You run the factory, but it's not really your factory. It belongs to the people. And so the people makes the decisions as to what the factory may or may not produce, how much the factory must charge, and what the profit sharing is of the factory. Don't make the mistake here of thinking Lenin was a good guy. He wasn't. He killed millions of his own people and he really didn't care. The only reason he ultimately stopped was exactly the same reason the DA is now in the GNU. The National Democratic Revolution tells the ANC, move until you encounter resistance. And this is actually, what's her name? She wrote a book on this. I'm trying to remember now. She works, I believe, for the Institute of Race Relations. Trying to remember her name. Anthea Jeffrey. That's her name. Anthea Jeffrey. She's head of policy, I believe, head of policy at the Institute of Race Relations. She wrote a book on this in 2023, I think, explaining the National Democratic Revolution and how the National Democratic Revolution actually functions. I need to get her on my show as well because she's phenomenal. Like the stuff that she figured out is actually it'll make your hair rise. The stuff that she's figured out, but effectively, she figured out that the whole purpose of communism in South Africa is you move until you encounter resistance, and then you pull back. You don't pull back in terms of you stop. You pull back in order to relax the public. So you do just enough to where the public starts to go up, and then you pull back. Because the next time you go, the public will take longer before they go up. That's the point. You just slowly inch your way forward. Now, what I can't remember if she said this in the book. She may have said this in the book, and now I just think I came up with it, but actually read it in her book. So please accept this as it could either be her, it could be someone else that said it, and I just don't remember who said it now. But one of the things that stood out to me, looking at the history of the Soviet Union, looking at the history of China with Mao, looking at the French Revolution even, because the French Revolution is super important to this, because ultimately Karl Marx is not the guy that came up with communism. Communism actually starts under Jean-Jacques Rousseau, under Courtesin, I believe it's Courtesin, something, Robespierre, over Robespierre, Marsalius Robespierre, who's a Frenchman, Godwin, who's an Englishman, who ultimately, writes very favorably for the French Revolution. Even Thomas Jefferson, super fan of the French Revolution until the French Revolution starts killing thousands of their own people. And that eventually turns Thomas Jefferson against the French Revolution. But ultimately, all of the ideas that Karl Marx ultimately would popularize starts in the French Revolution. We've understood socialism since forever. Nobody figured out nothing. Unexpected. That's not really true, because socialism, what makes socialism very difficult to figure out is the fact that it's not a vision of principle. It's a vision of hopes. To explain this maybe more concrete, just to help you make sense of it. In communism and socialism, the plans and the ideas are never expressed in how they are achieved, but always expressed in what they aim to achieve. So the goal is the plan. We're going to eradicate poverty. That's the plan. How we achieve that, that's of no concern, because we can ultimately try everything until we do it. Right? So if we're going to eradicate poverty, First, we'll kill all the capitalists, and if that doesn't eradicate poverty, we'll kill all the smart people, and if that doesn't eradicate poverty, we'll chase all the people out of the cities, and if that doesn't eradicate poverty, we'll chase all the people into the factories. Like it doesn't matter. We can do a million things. The plan is to eradicate poverty. Everything else is just whatever. Right? It doesn't really matter as long as that remains the goal. And the French ultimately end up basically getting a new leader, deposing the new leader, and killing the new leader, oftentimes in less than a year. Within a year, a leader gets to power. It turns out he can't fix the system. He can't make the perfect France, and then they just depose him and cut off his head. The French Revolution ends up in less than 3 or 4 years, killing something like 17,000 of their own followers, because these followers could never bring the revolution. They couldn't bring the liberty, the beauty that was supposed to be the French Revolution. It just doesn't happen because the goal is always this Fugazi. But nevertheless, this is how the ANC has always operated, and the current system that we are in, the GNU. Moeletsi Mbeki has pointed this out. This is what this article is about. And Moeletsi Mbeki makes the point in this argument that if the DA in 2024 stepped back, so if the DA stepped back and they said, no, we're not going into government with you, the ANC would have been finished already. The idea is, and this is not just Moeletsi Mbeki, I have made this exact same video about a month after the formation of the GNU. I made this video. And I said, a coalition, everyone is so worried about the doomsday coalition. But I am telling you, the doomsday coalition doesn't exist. It is a complete straw man. Any coalition between the EFF, the MK, and the ANC ends in only one way. They will tear each other apart. That's how it ends. They will tear each other apart. Yes, they'll destroy the economy of South Africa. Yes, they'll destroy the country for the most part. But do you truly believe that South Africa can be saved short of any of that? I've made multiple videos and we've done multiple live streams on this. I don't see how you save South Africa without it reaching rock bottom. I don't see it. The corruption within the system is so prevalent, so far spread, that only burning the system to the ground can get rid of the corruption. Last night while I was eating, I'm watching Yellowstone. I have never watched Yellowstone, so I'm watching Yellowstone, and some guys threw clover into the fields, and I didn't even know clover kills cows, but apparently clover kills cows. And they ended up burning the entire field because the clover that is now in the field will start growing and it will take over everything. This is exactly how you deal with a pest, with something like that, weeds. If weeds take over an entire field, sometimes the only thing you can do is burn it, because just trying to sort of work over the field, they'll still grow. They're weeds. They're difficult to get rid of. So certain types of weed, you just have to burn the entire thing and start again. And that is where South Africa is. I don't see a future where that isn't required. The only question is to what extent. It can be localized, it can be universal, or it can be targeted. So, for example, perhaps it's possible for a very clever government to surgically go in and burn down certain departments. Maybe burn down the police, the law enforcement system, and start again. Maybe burn down the army and start again. So it might be possible. But the fact that some departments and some facets of our society requires a complete reset, that is not debatable. It can't be debated. It can't be fixed. Um, things must collapse so we can start over in this country. I agree with you. I think collapse is really the only point. But now, if I start to put Moletsi Mbeki and Anthea together, if I start to and Anthea Jeffrey, if I take their philosophies and I put them together, so I am kind of stealing both of their work and I'm repackaging it into a new idea. Anthea Jeffrey argues that the DA in the ANC or in the GNU merely serves as a moment of reprieve. This is the ANC going, okay, we've pushed too hard on the communism. Let's take a step back. The DA is in there now. The DA is passing all of our BE policies. They're passing all of our communist policies. I mean, you have DA ministers that have said expropriation without compensation is with compensation because null is technically compensation. So the DA is serving their purpose very well within the national government, the government of national unity. And the ANC banked on this because the ANC understood that the DA is far too afraid of the so-called doomsday coalition. So this means that the DA will make concessions. The DA will accept certain antithetical events just to ensure that the doomsday coalition doesn't come to fruition. But this now also allows the ANC to take sort of a shielded approach where the ANC can say, wait, you guys don't understand. That was DA ministers that did this. This wasn't us. This was DA ministers. And all the while, this is allowing the public to get used to the idea of more government institution, more government institutionalized power. Because, and as Anthea Jeffrey actually points out, the NDR was designed with one purpose: to turn every company, every person in South Africa into an agent of the state. I added the fascism because this is what Mussolini said this fascism in the state is all about. The state is the corpo, the body, the corporation, and all the people, all the businesses are atoms, cells of this body, all working together for the good of the state. Now, Anthea Jeffrey goes on to explain how that's exactly what the NDR is designed to do. The idea with BEE has nothing to do with Black economic empowerment. Nothing. It doesn't even feature. The fact that most Black people do not benefit from Black economic empowerment, that's a feature of the system. Because the point of BEE is to make sure that every single company in South Africa serves the state. That's it. Graham, how are you doing, sir? So, Graham, I do live videos so that I can discuss. And so I'll give you guys a bit of background on what I'm actually talking about. I'll go through a story. I'll give you the insights of the story. And then I like to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on the story. And more often than not, the stories that I focus on are things that don't really work in video form. They're either way too large and it would cause me to make a half an hour video, which no one really wants to watch. So live streams just work a little bit better because it allows me to tackle larger content than what a video could allow for. Videos on YouTube work really well if you have like one focus and that's the only focus and you're just going on that one thing. They don't work that well if you have like a big overarching theme. So that's why I do live streams, or I prefer live streams for these kinds of conversations. The GNU was great, I think, because it exposed the DA for what they are, woke anti-Christian socialists. I'm grateful for the GNU because I will never vote DA again. Jock, how you doing, sir? And yes, I think a lot of people feel the same way, but I think in the same vein, the DA has given the ANC uh, enough breathing room to where the ANC can really now punish a lot of the people. Um, and they can now push because, and here's the thing that I will add that I've seen no one else add to this, no one else seems to see this. But as I look throughout the world at every single historical instance of communist revolution, at some point, the slow march through the institutions turn violent. At some point, it turns violent. And then all hell breaks loose. In Russia, it started very violent, at least the parts that we see, but it wasn't actually. Right at the beginning, they were making use of the political system. It was because they failed to convince the majority of the people that their idea was good, that they were forced to become violent. And the same is going to happen here in South Africa. Mao did the same thing. Mao wasn't really all that violent. He was at first trying to make use of the political system. It wasn't until Mao realized uh, the people are kind of turning on him. He's not getting the support that he was hoping for. And then he said, okay, violence now. And I believe that this is going to happen in South Africa. I believe that as the ANC starts to realize, and this election is going to tell us much, the election that's coming up. Because the election that's coming up, if the ANC stabilizes around 40%, I think there's room for the ANC to just continue, right? Because they'll think to themselves, okay, maybe we can salvage this. If the ANC drops to 35, maybe below 35% in the local government elections, I believe we're going to see violence. I believe the ANC will ultimately engage in the violent revolution, the final push for the complete takeover of South Africa. And while the majority of South Africans are not violent and are not revolutionary, I think the ANC is going to hope that the core of the ANC continues along and comes along for the ride. Because that's how it's happened throughout history. That's what every communist movement does when it starts to realize that its power is slipping. It has to become violent. In fact, what makes South Africa such a big outlier is the fact that no other violent communist revolution had free and fair elections 32 years after the victory. When the revolutionary government takes power, it usually doesn't keep elections free and fair. It usually starts corrupting the elections very early on. And I think this is again indicative of the mindset of the general South African public. The South African public in general will not tolerate violent revolution. They're not violent. And stealing an election is an act of violence. Even though there's no real violence going on, people view elections as a peaceful transfer of power. If you corrupt that system, you're now violently corrupting the peaceful transfer of power. And I think the ANC understands this will lead to a lot of anger from the general public that is meant to support them. But if you're the ANC, and by the way, I can give you um, another angle. If you go, Stefan, I don't quite agree with you on that. Like, I think it's a bit weak to just say historically all revolutionary movements have become violent, therefore they will. If you think that isn't enough of an angle and you don't necessarily think that is enough of proof, let me give you a different angle that might actually convince you that violence will have to come. You won't find a single person in the entirety of South Africa that won't tell you the ANC is up to their eyeballs in corruption. Right? Every single person understands this. They are completely inundated with corruption. So, what happens if a different party takes power? Does the ANC get arrested? Does the ANC lose? How much do they lose, actually? Because think about this. In general, what does a servant of the state lose? So, normally, in perfect circumstances, a servant of a state, a minister, a deputy minister, or a municipal manager will lose the salary, but they'll have the benefits, right? Because they worked and therefore they paid into some kind of uh, 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 what's the word? Retirement fund. So when they finally retire or step down, they'll have whatever money they saved up in their retirement fund, right? And they'll usually have medical aid because that's one of the perks of working for the government. You have medical aid for life in terms of your retirement package, right? So maybe you step down and you have to go find a different job, but considering in most countries working for the government doesn't pay that well, a lot of people actually use working for the government as a way to get into the private sector because you can make a lot more money in the private sector. In South Africa, that's entirely reversed. If you want to make money in South Africa, you work for the government. That's where you make most of your money, is in the government. Moreover, the municipal manager that is being fired or being removed from office doesn't just lose the meager salary that a municipal manager makes. They also lose all of the benefits of the corruption that flooded into their bank accounts. The millions upon millions of rands that they made every single month and year in kickbacks. All of that goes away. So there is a direct incentive if you are an ANC cadre employed municipal or governmental worker, you have an incentive to hold on to that power. Because without that power, you lose millions. And now there's people that want to tell me that South Africa can have a peaceful transfer of power. That the ANC will, in 2029, lose the election and they'll just go into the opposition benches. Joe Texas, yes, the fund is bankrupt, but the government is never actually truly bankrupt. The government can print money and put money in the fund. Like, the only time that will be a problem is if the fund physically runs out of money and the government physically is no longer capable of printing money. And for now, at least, it appears as if there's some force in the world that is artificially keeping South Africa going, which I genuinely believe. And I realize this is a huge conspiracy theory, but no one can explain to me why the South African rand is suddenly doing better than what it did last year. I've not seen a single explanation that makes any sense whatsoever. Our economy isn't doing better. Our inflation isn't doing better. The government isn't ruling better. So why is the rand stronger? No one can explain this to me. And yes, I know the rand isn't technically stronger, the dollar is weaker. But on every single metric, the South African government is worse this year than what they were last year. And yet, the currency doesn't fall. The currency does not reflect the weakness of the governance of South Africa. I believe that there are very powerful leftists in this world who are artificially keeping the South African economy going because South Africa is the ultimate experiment of Western decline. South Africa is what the leftists wanted the world to become. Pigs can fly. How are you doing, sir? It's better. It's doing better because our imports haven't grown. I don't even think that's the whole reason, although that does have some weight on it. I agree. Wondered a lot how and why the rand is so strong, but it should not be. Nick, nothing makes sense to me. About our currency, nothing makes sense to me. The fact that the rand just keeps to truck along, even throughout tariffs that is being placed upon it, world trade being severely hurt, there is literally a shortage of the place, like literally the place where we get most of our refined oil from is currently not being traded, right? That place is closed. And somehow the rand is unaffected. The international investors are going, oh, no problem whatsoever. Every country can operate without refined petroleum products, you know. Something is strange. I'm not telling you what it is. I don't know what it is. I'm just throwing out an idea of what I think it could be. It feels to me that with President Trump's war against South Africa, there are powers in the world that desperately need South Africa to survive this war because South Africa is meant to be the blueprint of where Europe is supposed to go. Europe is supposed to do what South Africa did. In 1994, Nelson Mandela stands on the podium and says, Rainbow Nation, diversity is our strength. Open the borders, let people come. We are a country for everyone, which of course in turn means that we're a country really for no one. I was watching Prince Mashele. He was speaking at the Lex Libertas thing, the videos on Truth Report, and he made a remark that in general I like Prince Mashele. I'm a huge fan of his, but this remark kills me every single time. He said diversity is a strength, and his proof was America. The reason that remark kills me is when someone says to me diversity is a strength, my first question is, what do you mean? What diversity are you referring to? If racial diversity is the only thing you're referring to, then you're wrong. Why does a room full of black, white, purple, green, and orange people serve any more value than a room full of black people, white people, brown people exclusively? Why? There's literally zero reason why the one room would be a strength over the other. If your argument is that diversity is a strength in terms of cultures, you're wrong again. Because the evidence shows that singular cultures working together towards singular goals achieve those goals far more often than multiple cultures trying to navigate how to reach a specific goal. So clearly, that also isn't what you're referring to. Unity is strength. That's strength. Unity is strength. And if everyone is unified behind a singular goal or a singular culture, it doesn't matter what race they are. It doesn't matter what gender they are. If we are all unified in a singular goal, working towards the same idea, and this is so well expressed in terms of sports. I heard someone the other day use a sport analogy for this. Imagine if the Springboks were to run out on the field on Saturday against the All Blacks, and Rassie Erasmus before the game goes, fullback, every single time you get the ball, I want you to run as hard as you can. We are a running team. And then he says to the wings, every single time you get the ball, you need to kick the ball because we're a kicking team. And he says to the centers and to the fly half, when you guys get the ball, you throw it to the ground because we're a scrumming team. And to the forwards, he say, guys, when you guys are scrumming, I want you to scrum as hard as you can, but don't win back the ball because we're just here to punish them. And he says to the scrum half, when you get the ball, just throw it to whoever the hell you want. What do you think the chances of success is for the Springbok team? How well do you think that would actually go for them? Would the Springboks win that game? considering the fact that there's about 5 different goals of where we're going to be going with this game? The answer is probably not. We're probably losing that game because you have 5 different groups of players all doing their own thing. The fullback is consistently trying to run with the ball, even though, no one else is going with him. The wings, even if he is on the verge of scoring a goal, as soon as that wing gets the ball, he's kicking the bloody thing, right? Because we're a kicking team and we have to score all of our points from kicks. It's a nightmare. It's a mess, and no one's going anywhere. You need unity. You need a vision. We're all going here, boys. This is the goal. Forwards, you're going to scrum as hard as you can. Fly off, you're going to pass that ball to the centers and to the wings. Wings, you're going to run with that ball, breaking to the inside, making it easier for our forward pack to dominate their forward pack. Forwards, whenever you get that ball, you're going to maul these guys to death. Show them what it's like to play against South Africa, right? Teach them how the Springboks play rugby, right? This is one team, one goal. This is where we're going. Now everyone knows, everyone is on the same page. That's called unity, not diversity. Also, referring to America as a very diverse country, the only thing you're referring to here is racial. Yes, America is a racially very diverse country. But if you're like me, and trust me, I know a lot of people from America. I used to make videos for American and European audiences pretty much exclusively. Very few South Africans watched me. Back in my gaming days, although I do know some of you did. So shout out to you guys. But if you are, and I'll tell you this, if you're on Discord and you can't see the person you're speaking to, you could be speaking to a white, black, Mexican, Asian, American, and you would not be able to tell the difference. And I don't mean in terms of how they speak. I don't mean in terms of the words that they use. The ideas, the way they think, the way they operate, it's the same people. It's literally the same people. They are American. They think like Americans. I met a Mexican guy, biggest Trump supporter you'll ever meet. I don't know that. While we were talking, I thought I'm speaking to a white American here. Massive Trump supporter, hates immigrants, illegal immigrants, despises the Democrats, despises communism, hates socialism, just balls to the wall capitalist. I genuinely, in my mind, as we were talking, I had this idea. I'm speaking to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy from America, and blonde hair, blue eye is not a reference to the Aryan nation. I just genuinely thought I'm talking to a white American guy. Turns out, dude's Mexican. He's Hispanic, 100% Hispanic, speaks Spanish, right? As well. He can speak English, but he can also speak Spanish. Married to a Spanish woman or a Hispanic woman. Just, he's American. In his head, him being Mexican is just his race. In terms of who he is American. And then diversity doesn't matter. We don't have that in South Africa. There is not a single South African in South Africa except for those who try to pretend it. Peter Kriel will tell you, I'm South African first. He doesn't even know what the hell that means, because if you tell me you're South African first, tell me what is a South African. Define South African. Define the culture of a South African. How does a South African view marriage? Is marriage between a man and a woman? Between a man and a man? Between a woman and a woman? Is marriage between two people? Is marriage between 4 or 5 people? Is marriage even required? Are kids a good thing or a bad thing to a South African? Should a South African have many kids, fewer kids? What exactly is the deal? How does a South African feel about the roles and the responsibilities within the marriage? Is the woman and therefore submits to the husband, or is the husband and the wife equal? What is the culture of that marriage? Who takes the lead in that marriage? who takes the lead in terms of the family, who takes care of the family, who provides for the family. What exactly is a South African's view on all of these things? How does a South African feel about theft? How does a South African feel about murder? How does a South African feel about common law? What are the common laws of a South African? None of these things can ever be answered because there is no such thing as a South African. There is Afrikaners, there are Zulu, there are Sepedi, there are Xhosas, but there is no South African. That doesn't exist. That is a Fugazi. If you want a South African, you must first be able to define what it is. Otherwise, all you have in this country are a disparate group of about 9 to 10 different cultures who's basically just trying to not destroy each other, because each of them feels something completely different. And by the way, it's not impossible to create a South African identity. It can be done, but not through force. You can't force people to become something that they do not want to be. It has to be done organically. It has to be allowed to come into existence. So that, by definition, means that you also have to allow people to go their own way, to do their own thing. Because unless you allow that, you're always going to come back to one fundamental problem. People don't do well when they're told what they can and cannot do. So you have to allow for a South African identity. Because right now, the only thing that makes people South African is the Springboks. That appears to be the only unifying thing in South Africa is, we support the Springboks. It's not enough. You can't build a country on a sports team. While I love the Springboks, a country does not build. So the idea that diversity is a strength, nonsense. Unity is a strength. You have to find a unifying principle, a unifying concept, and then build around that. And once you have that, race doesn't matter, culture in terms of miniature cultures, because that always exists. Just FYI. If you go in Texas even, so just take Texas, huge state, the culture of Dallas and the culture of Houston is completely different. The culture of Dallas, Houston, and Austin, completely different. Not the same culture. Same people. They're Texans. They live in Texas. They believe in the same stuff. They don't have the same cultures, but those are miniature cultures, right? Those are almost like microscopic cultures where they have slight variances in how they like to do things. But on the big stuff, they agree. On the big stuff, they feel the same about stuff. Unexpected. I see you rattling off a bunch of nonsense consistently, right? But I notice that evidence is very light with you. You just rattle off a bunch of stuff. Now, I know why you're doing it. I know why you're doing it. You're hoping to win an audience for yourself. You're hoping that some of the people in my chat will see, oh, he called him deluded. He must know what he's talking about. Go watch you. You have an ID. It's South African. Well done on missing the entire point, my bro. I do want to say, though, I don't think many of my viewers are going to follow you because that might just be the most retarded take I've ever heard in my entire life. I have an ID. It's South African. So a piece of paper this just puts away all of the other things that's problematic. You are out of your mind, sir. But I'm going to do you a favor. Peace. All right. Um, I have an ID too. What now? Yeah, I mean, it's all good and well when you have people raising their own opinions, but I have told you before, if you come at me with pure insult and you try to use that as some kind of argument, I am likely to ban you and just move on with my life because I don't really care. You can come in and you can have your debate, you can have your conversation, you can have your say, but not if you're just going to be, obnoxious about it. Um, for how long began the Springboks be all black? Tool to brainwash the masses. So, Joe, I don't necessarily think so. I think for now the government is leaving the Springboks alone because they realize that there's no there's no world in which they can really control the Springboks. Um, Not that they're not trying, but I also want to be. Christine, no, because my chat isn't democratic. This is an autocratic place. This is my channel, my chat. I determine who I want in my chat and who I don't. And I have no problem if people want to disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. But there are certain things that I don't engage with. And look, if unexpected videos, whatever the hell his name is, if he wants to be let back in, he can email me. He can email me and he can say, "Hey, I'm sorry about this. Here's, all the reasons why I said what I said. I can I come back? I'll let him back. There's a few people that I've allowed to come back on my channel, that I've unbanned from the channel. But if you act obnoxious, I am just removing you. Right? And then you can go scream in the void. I don't like doing it. Generally speaking, I would prefer not to ban people from the chat, but I'm also not going to sit here and be insulted for no reason. Like if you insult me and I'm genuinely wrong about something, fair game. I have to accept it. I was wrong. This is life. But if you insult me and then your argument against my argument is I have an ID book and it says South African, I'm sorry, but like, holy crap. You want to call me delusional and then that's your argument against my argument? No. I'm gonna just leave it there. If you want to see South Africa, go run the Comrades Marathon. There you have 20,000 people. Yeah, 20,000 people with a common goal, and each one of them is willing to help another succeed as far as possible. Fairness, but that's exactly it, right? There's a common goal. You want to see South Africa? Look at the Springboks. Why is it that the black, the colored, the Indian, the white players in the Springboks are all able to play together and are all able to get along? Because there's unity. They are unified by the jersey and by the goal of them stepping foot on the field every Saturday. You do not build a nation from diversity. That does not work. You need unity. Now, of course, if your only idea of diversity is, oh, they look different, therefore they must be diverse, you're out of your mind, first and foremost, because race is a very bad denominator for diversity. But nevertheless, that's not going to do it. That's not going to cut it. You have to be able to you have to be able to find a single concept of or idea that you can unify people around. Ban them sooner. They start moving on, the better, bro. Yeah, Dirty, how you doing? I don't like, as I said, I don't like banning people because I do believe that people should have the right to say whatever the hell they want, right? And if you, like I said, insult me all you want, but at least have a good reason for insulting me. Like even if you're wrong, but you tried at least to make a point, I'm happy to take that, right? It's when you clearly didn't think and you're just here. I know what that person was up to, which is actually also one of the reasons I banned them. You have this quite often on Twitch as well. People will come in and disagree with everything you say because what they're really after is advertising. They're marketing their own channel. And so that's really what this person was on. South Africa problem isn't the people. Most people in the country get along. It is the ANC and the corrupt politicians and the media. Radio Guy, I am inclined to agree with you, right? To a large extent. South Africa's biggest problem is the corrupt government and the corrupt media. You are correct. Most South Africans do get along, but all South Africans don't get along. Not in terms of hating each other or in terms of wanting to kill each other. That's not the point. It's on smaller things, like I already explained, marriage. Most South Africans don't actually get along on that question. If you ask an Afrikaner what is marriage, they will tell you it's between a man and a woman. It's a union before God. If you ask a Zulu, they're like to give you a very different answer because in Zulu tradition, a man is allowed to have multiple wives. And that's their culture. That creates a significant problem when it comes to establishing laws. Because marriage, there should be a law that governs marriage. You should be able to define what a marriage is. You should be able to define between who a marriage takes place so that you can define what divorce would look like and what the system would look like. If you can't even agree on what a marriage is, you're going to have a big problem trying to come up with a set of laws to govern it. And that's it's actually far more important than people know. But, in terms of the overall laws that need to exist, that's a tiny thing. How do we deal with criminals? How do we deal with people who steal? How do we deal with people who murder? What are our responses and our requirements on those things? And I'm pretty sure you will find throughout South Africa, there are many different opinions based on the different cultural groups within the country, how they believe certain things should be dealt with. That creates a significant problem because we need to find one unified country in a sea of diverse opinions on how that country should be run. That's not going to work. And this is why I said what you need is a voluntary system. It can't be forced. It needs to be voluntary, where people organize around similar positions, opinions, thoughts, and ideas. And look, if that thought and idea means I want to live with white people or I want to live with Zulu people, great. If that's your express position, you are allowed to have that express position. But the idea, but it can't be forced. It has to be something that plays itself out forward. Like I, for example, would choose to live with fellow Christians and people who believe in the Judeo-Christian identity that is espoused by the West. That's the people that I would live with. I couldn't really care less about the race of the person that is my neighbor, provided we agree on these fundamental things. What is a woman? We agree on what marriage is, and we agree on children being important and all the rest of it. So I think that uh, if you allow that to naturally come into existence, you allow for people to naturally order themselves, given enough time. So if you play that forward 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and by the way, we have an example in history of this happening. America was originally founded as 13 states, not as a single country, 13 states that came together in cooperation. These 13 states represented 13 distinct cultural groups within America that shared very little in terms of the minute, finite details of how our country should be run. That's why they decided that every culture runs itself and that these cultures simply cooperate with one another in the sort of broader sense. That was the original idea, and we know how successful that was in the long run. This is what South Africa needs. We need to come together around cultural ideas. And note, I say cultural ideas. I don't mean it doesn't have to be hard culture. Right? So it doesn't have to be just Afrikaners for Afrikaners, although if you want that, you can. It doesn't have to be just Zulu for Zulu, although if you want that, you can. But it needs to be around the ideas that we can all share. And if you play that out 60, 70, 100 years from now, I believe you will inevitably create a single country, not culture, but country, where 90% of the country shares the same values and ideas, believe the same things, feel the same things. They still disagree on minor stuff, but in the main, they share most things. But that's when you allow it to expand and be established organically. Go, how you doing? Cultures can't be unified. Trying to unify two cultures is the same destroying two cultures. We've been doing this for 400 years and we're all still not unified. How would you unify Afrikaner and Black culture? So, speakeasy, we have not actually tried to unify the cultures. We've tried to forcibly merge the cultures or absorb the cultures into one another. But we have not actually tried to unify cultures. Not for 400 years, not for 100 years, not for 30 years. We have only ever tried to forcibly sort of subjugate cultures into whatever view we held. But in terms of unifying cultures, what I'm talking about isn't saying, okay, all Afrikaners and all Zulus are now one. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying allow the cultures to organize themselves as they see fit, governing themselves as they see fit, and then find a unified system that protects each of these cultures to exist on their own. And playing that forward, you will eventually find a unification within it. People will eventually unify around it. You find plenty of Black people today in South Africa who might be Zulu in origin, but in terms of how they believe are far more Western, far more Afrikaner actually, in how they believe, who now believe that a man and a woman is to be married and have children and that union matters. They're Zulu in their culture, but the culture that they live by is no longer the Zulu culture. That does happen. But it has to happen organically. It can't happen, it can't be forced. And it doesn't matter if it never happens. To your point, speakeasy. Imagine if it never happens, right? So in 100 years from now, all of these cultures that lived separately still live separately. So what? That's fine. Each is governing its own. And I'm not sure what you're going to disagree with. Speakeasy. It is the fatigue we need a break from. True. You cannot unify two cultures, but they can work together towards common goals. That is unity. Yeah, I mean, I think what I would ask Speakeasy is, what do you view as unify? Like when I tell you unify a culture, what do you view as unifying cultures? Are you viewing it as merging those two cultures and they just become one culture? Because that's not what unifying cultures mean. Unifying culture simply means giving. This is why I've used the example of the Springbok rugby team. You unify cultures by giving them a specific singular goal to work towards. So within their microcosms, within their sort of biomes, they can organize themselves as they wish. Be that Afrikaner, be that Zulu, be that Spedi, doesn't matter. They govern themselves and they make their own decisions. But then all of these cultural groups is given a unified vision for South Africa more broadly. So each culture can operate within itself, but it also has this vision of where the country wants to go, what the country wants to achieve, economic growth, and all the rest of it. That's what I mean with unity. And the point I was making is if you do that, if you allow that to naturally exist, over time, 100 years from now, the area that was Zulu before might not be purely Zulu anymore. You might end up getting a bunch of different people from all manner of races that now live in the Zulu area because they happen to agree with that sort of cultural view of things. Then the same is true for the Afrikaner area and the Sepedi area and the Xhosa area. So if you naturally allow it, it will eventually open itself up much more, but not if it's forced. That's the point that I was making. Not sure uh, if you disagree with that. I'd love to know why. Jackie, how you doing? Why should cultures be unified? We should all just treat each other with respect. Blaming whites for apartheid, while most of us did not experience apartheid, is to distract from a corrupt government. So, Jackie's the point isn't that cultures should be unified. That's not the point I'm making. I'm not making the argument that we should all be one culture. Not at all. I'm making the point that you can't force everyone to be the same. You can't force everyone together. My argument is only in what you can't do, not in what you should do or must do, because I don't believe there's anything such as must. You must not do anything. There's just things that you can't do. And for example, you can't force two cultures together. But will it inevitably happen? Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. If I look at America and I look at the history of America, you have 13 colonies, states, that start off as effectively individual cultures. In fact, so individual that they nearly broke out in war multiple times because of their disagreements. They ultimately come together as a single country, remaining distinctly unique in terms of the colonies that they are, the states that they are. And today, many of those cultures that once existed, you wouldn't be able to tell apart. You wouldn't be able to know if you were talking to someone from Mississippi or someone from Florida without the accent. But in terms of the action, the beliefs, the things that they're doing, it's basically the same thing. So the point is cultures evolve and they change over time, but it has to be allowed to happen naturally, organically. Otherwise you're going to run into issues. That's the point I was making. Marlo, one cannot derive an is from an ought, meaning. Am I doing that? Are you saying I am doing that? In what way? I am going to go soon. So let's make this the last bit of the conversation, because I'm sure many of you have to get back to work and have to do all sorts of things, and I still have to go to the shops quickly to get some stuff going. Remember, tomorrow I have South Africa first. Really excited to have that conversation. That's going to be tomorrow. I don't normally stream on Wednesdays, but that's the day that he has available. So you guys can come check that out. Not at all bad. All right. Well, I still appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out. For those of you that had respectful debates and conversations, I really appreciate you for that. Those of you that had less respectful debates and conversations, still appreciate you for being here and being a part of the channel. And yeah, guys, if there's ever anything that you disagree with, that you feel I'm not addressing correctly, you're welcome to DM me. You're welcome to have that conversation with me in DMs, on email. Even if you decide no, I want to I want to have a phone call, that can be set up as well. It's I just want I don't want you to feel like you're limited in how you can have the conversation. So please feel free to engage with me, even if it is offline. I'm always open to changing my mind, to realizing if I'm wrong, if I think you guys have a better idea. Um, so please feel free for it. Uh, Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for coming out and giving me your time, your energy, your effort. Really appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, if the Lord wills it, I will see you in the next one. God bless you. Peace.